Are we live?
We are live. It is 8 p.m., October 29th. We're live on Facebook for another Union Stories. Actually, not just
It's Tuesday.
any Union Stories.
Oh, it makes me sad. It's not the final Union Stories. It's just the last song
It's the last for now. We've been doing this for 12 weeks, mostly live, joining you every Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock to talk about Kids on the Same Ride, going song by song. And as such, we have reached the end. Song number 12, the final track. So, I know. So we are saying for now, we've enjoyed these live podcasts, these discussions, so I'm sure that there will be times in the future where we'll, do some more of these live videos and hopefully, have some very interesting things to talk about, new music maybe to talk about, other things that interest to talk about.
I like the idea of new music.
Well, that's the thing. What's old is worth celebrating, and once you say goodbye to one thing, it's on to something else.
Are you talking about me?
Well, actually, we're talking about...
old.
You did have a birthday.
I'm not talking about that. I was just talking about being old.
Oh, I thought that's where she wanted to go with it. Well, if you've also noticed, it's sad because this is the final Union Stories for now. But Doug isn't here.
He's not up here. He's usually kind of taking up my head, which is nice because he can kind of block my white hair or something. So I don't know. I'm over here.
I was looking to see if maybe that was Doug so we can add him on, but he thought he wasn't going to be able to make it, so he's not very good at goodbyes either, or hellos, or
really
words of any sort.
Anything.
It's not his thing. And sadly, Doug's not able to make it this evening, but I guess we'd like to first thank everyone, whether this is the first time you've joined us for Union Stories, or if you've been, with us for all 12 weeks. We appreciate it, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Well, thank you for sharing. A lot of you shared the videos and, tuned in pretty much every week, and then gone on and shared our stories and all of that, so we appreciate that.
So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the final of our stories. And that is the story on... Actually, that's the reason we've done this to begin with. We just like to say that. The reason we decided that this would be fun to do is that, you put music out there. And with us, we actually had, some other things in addition to the music, some videos, a documentary that we made quite a big deal about. But even with all that time and attention, we weren't really able to always go into... deep dives into some of these songs, and we thought it would be interesting to maybe talk a little bit about what goes behind each of these songs. And that was why we did it, and that's why we're here tonight for song number 12. Pebbles tried to warn us, but did we listen?
No, we didn't.
No, we did not listen.
No.
So, Pebbles, for a very practical reason, there's a reason why we are ending our discussion talking about this song. It was last most simply because it was 11 minutes long. When we did our first album, we, more so than the second album, our first album we had in one location. This time around, we fortunately had it everywhere that you could stream on all the mainstream services. So it was a little harder to track each of them. When we had an album out on just one service, it was very easy to see that the listens and plays, downloads of each song went down as you went through the album.
Yeah.
So the things that were listened to the most were the first two songs, and then it dropped off by the middle of the album, and by the end you just get a few spins here and there. So, it was very obvious to us, and not just to us, but to anybody, who consumes music these days, the idea of albums or long attention spans are not quite what they used to be. Sadly, I still think of things in terms of gatefolds and lyric sheets. And
sitting down with a full album and the lyric sheets and listening from beginning to end, kind of like watching a movie.
And thinking about
kinda how
how
we do
those
it out here.
songs go together,
Right.
the sequencing. And I know
Thematically is-
nowadays people listen to songs a la carte, just sort of one at a time. And then we could see that after the first album that, the songs at the end are not going to get as much love. So for that very practical reason, we thought that we would put Pebbles at the end so that any 11-minute song would be at the end of a 1-hour album, as it were, as a reward to anyone that had that kind of patience. And hopefully people found the songs towards the end of the album on their own later on, and that they still had some sort of life outside of the album. But yes, Pebbles was the ending track because of its length. And it is an odd song. First, we'll start with that title. Hey, Linda, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Linda. Linda's one that always shares. Linda's
Yes.
always she
And
always
she is
tunes in
here
and she
almost
always
every week.
always shares, and we appreciate that.
Hey,
Thanks.
Herzog's
Linda.
there too. What's up?
What's going on, Herzog?
But yes, that title with all of its punctuation and it was literally a rip of Sufjan Stevens. Anyone who's familiar with Sufjan Stevens will know that he has extremely long sentence length titles to his tracks. And what I did for this one is I decided that I was going to come up with a title before I had the words. And it's typically not the way it works. Typically, Doug does music. I either put words to it or I write lyrics, or take something I have and try to get it to a depth.
Yeah.
I very rarely will come up with a title first, but I decided I want a pretentious sounding title, like Sufjan Stevens, and then I wanted to see if I could come up with a story that befit that title. So I wanted a song that was just as large and pretentious. And I think I might have come up with something as large and pretentious as that, because this is really a headphones number. If you put on headphones, you will hear
There's
all
a lot going on.
kinds of stuff
A lot going on.
I used it as a playground, really, to just see what all I could get away with, what all I could stuff into an 11-minute song. There are probably 14 vocal tracks on Pebbles. Some of which are only audible if you do have on those headphones and are listening really intently to some really crazy, bizarro kind of vocal stuff I was trying. Because I basically had carte blanche to do, what it is that I wanted with this one, and so much time, I just kind of went nuts. And so I spent weeks just like, well, we'll try this, and then listening to it, no, that doesn't work, or, well, that's just crazy enough, it might work. And so some of it stuck in there, and I basically threw the kitchen sink at it, and it worked. And Jerry didn't. She had the opportunity, like we all do. But I know last week I talked about how I didn't really do anything to the song last week, "Search Engine Fire." Oddly, there's only 2 songs on this album where all the band members don't appear. All 3 band members appear on the first 10 tracks, and on the last 2 tracks are, all Jerry and Doug on Search Engine, and all me and Doug on this final track, or I should say Doug and I. But she had the opportunity to add things, but she wasn't sure, just like I wasn't sure.
Well, so what I remember is I remember coming home after you'd recorded several of the tracks, and and again, it's one of those, if you put the headphones on and really listen to it, there's so many things going on. But one of the voices that the narrator, the boy in the story that is telling the story, is telling parts of the story about the girl in the story. And so he's essentially, it'd be like you coming home and saying, somebody did something and she said, da, 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 and you're mimicking a girl's voice. And so the character's mimicking the girl's voice, and you're like, now you could do this or you could do that part. And I said, no, I think it needs to be the guy, because he's telling the story, and he's telling the story like a guy would tell a story about a girl saying something or doing something. He's mimicking her voice. So he's saying, and then she said, nah, 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 it's like.
So those high parts are me, as the
Well,
narrator,
the
mimicking a female voice, rather than us going the traditional route of having Jared do a part that would maybe be the female part. And again, it's kind of bonkers, but it does work.
It works, yeah.
And I guess lyrically, I will just say I'm really proud of this one. I know it's more than a bit odd, but I think it's one of the most complete and detailed stories I've ever pulled off, and I don't mean that just because it is. Yes, Steve, it is actually 11 minutes long. But I think that just because I would think I was able to be more descriptive in a way that I'd really love to nail more often. I mean, it really is sort of rank file and serial number from the beginning. You got the narrator talking about this young girl who shows up. So immediately we know where she's from. She's from Georgia, and she's a new kid in school. And we know what her parents do for her father does for a living. And I mean, I really think that I was able to, in a way that I wish I could do more often, was able to really detail out this crazy, almost soap opera-ish, if you will, story, chocked full of detail. Essentially, this special needs child is a new kid in town. So first of all, you're different, and you're new. And as we all know, there really can be sometimes nothing more cruel than children. So she's got a double whammy as far as that goes. She also has a very strong faith that is off-putting to some. And so she really has 3 strikes against her. And as the new kid in school, she's picked on relentlessly over all these differences. And it culminates in a very brutal, actually, assault that occurs and that the narrator is actually part of. So he is describing her arrival, the way that this young woman is treated, and then this brutal assault happens at school. He is the one who watches the door to make sure that the assault is not interrupted. So the narrator is the only one whose face Pebbles wouldn't necessarily have seen in all of this. As such, he feels really guilty and nervous over his participation in this awful act. And so he tries to overcompensate by treating Pebbles kindly, to the point that, as he tries to assuage his guilt, as they grow up over the years, they become so close they actually fall in love and end up married. And years later, after a night of drinking, Pebbles offers some very disturbing news to our narrator. She lets him know the truth about a unsolved mystery from their childhood. Children had gone missing from their town years before and had never been found. Because there was never any real retribution or knowledge of the original assault on Pebbles, Pebbles would have hardly have seemed, particularly in her condition, like a suspect of any sort, anyone capable of doing something to these other kids. But again, after a drunken night, once they were married, Pebbles reveals to the narrator exactly what she had done to extract her revenge on those who had been cruel to her. This obviously is very disturbing news to find out, that the person you're married to was capable of pulling off such a calculated series of murders, as it were. And it's also very worrisome to him as to why Pebbles would be revealing all of this knowledge to him now. Is it because she just was guilty over it and wanted him to know? Or, in his mind, is it because she knows of my participation and she has just been playing the long game and she's informing me of what she is capable of to keep me on edge as to what possibly could now happen to me? And
it's a twisted story.
It is a very twisted story. So,
I think the first time I read it, I was like, "Are you sure about this? This is a pretty twisted story."
It is.
But
I was at times worried that maybe I didn't tell it with enough sensitivity because it is so over the top. But I think it worked better over the top without being insensitive to the subject matter. It's just a bit of pulp fiction, and I think it really worked as such.
Yeah.
I remember actually singing you all the song for the first time. I actually normally don't get that opportunity to just say, hey, I have this idea. Doug already had music, and I had written words to the music, and I had actually, the first time they heard it was me singing it for them. And I remember being nervous because, I felt like I was auditioning and instead of presenting a final thing like I normally do. And I remember feeling really validated because both Doug and Jerry reacted with like a wow, oh wow. And it made me feel fantastic that, okay, maybe I actually captured what I was hoping to do. Now, of course, we bust each other's chops in this band too. That's part of being best friends and married and things. You can't let us, anyone have too big a head. So after feeling initially great that first time I sang it for them, I do believe that every other time we ever practice it, because of its length, that would be the time that somebody would want. She would go make a sandwich, take a shower.
I hate that I lost it, but at one point I remember I would come upstairs. You guys were down in the basement and be practicing it, and that would be my opportunity. You're right. I'd come up and get a snack, like use the restroom, and then I did a video, just this goofy video of myself, like kind of, oh, what do storytellers do while everybody else is downstairs singing? And I don't know even what I did. I mean, it was just like I was doing a goofy video, but I lost that video because you can hear you guys downstairs in the basement doing the song, and I'm just up here goofing off. And but it's funny. Linda said, another Stephen King, and the song is a pretty good piece of fiction, I think. And if it's funny because it is a short story in a lot of ways. I'm gonna cough. I apologize. But the Kevin and I've been together since I was in high school and with through college and stuff together, and you've always been a writer. And you wrote some short stories in college, one in particular that was about some kids that
I forgot about that.
And that kind of had a wild experience and stuff, and it always reminded me of that. And then you wrote another one too about I think a girl that exacted some revenge or something, but it was there's maybe
I wonder what this says about me.
But
maybe you don't know.
Yeah, Steve's right. He's no wonder you like songs like Preacher. But
shows like Preacher. This could be a plot from Preacher.
But yeah,
it's that kind of over the top.
It is over the top,
but essentially at the end of the day, what you end up with is a trapped narrator who just found out that he's married to a murderer. But at the same time, he hasn't made the same sort of confessions to her where he might, have the opportunity as to whether or not I should let her know that I was involved in these awful things that happened to her as a kid, or if she already knows and this is her way of letting me know and putting me on notice. So you don't get any resolution there. I love open-ended. I love it sometimes when a movie or a song or something points to a direction and then lets you to your imagination as to, well, I wonder what they do with that and what happens next. So what happens next? You can leave it down in the comments. Let us know what you think happens next in this relationship. Does it go on as normal? Does Pebbles extract her revenge on our narrator? Does he confess?
Do they live happily ever after? Or do they, does he...
Or just... you never know.
Or does he kill her because he's afraid she's going to kill him? Well, there's all kinds of things that could happen. And that's the great thing about, I think, a...
sequel.
Oh. Pebbles tried to warn us.
A 12-minute sequel on the next... No, probably not. But yes, Doug had music. If he was here, I could hopefully he could have expounded a little bit more on the music. But he did have this music first. I came up with a story. I told him we're going to need a few more verses.
You just start looping some.
But in my defense, Doug being the trooper, I mean, I will give Doug credit for this. He is. I know I hate giving him credit for anything, but he does roll with it. If you say, "Hey, let's do this," he'll try. It's just like, all right,
yeah, all right.
So hey Doug, cool. Add more verse. How many? You're like double it, okay? And it didn't blink. And instead, he just rolled with it like. It was a 9-minute song with the verses, and he decided that wasn't long enough. Let's just go all out and throw on this big outro at the end as well. So that 2 minutes of noise and blips and all the cool stuff going on at the end.
It just wasn't long enough.
Here on headphones. Yeah, it's Doug extending the song because we already have an epic. Own it. Go for it. So And I'm fine for an epic song at the end of an epic album, because about the time this came out, even though we are in a streaming culture right now, Kendrick Lamar, I think, had his album out that was extremely long. War on Drugs had an hour album that went like 70 minutes, and it was one of the best of that year. So, for those who enjoy old school records,